On the radio, it's 9:40, 20 minutes before 10 o'clock. Alan Dershowitz, or I have the privilege of calling him Avi Dershowitz, Harvard law professor, prominent legal scholar, best-selling author whose latest book is The Case Against Impeaching Trump. This is for Avi.
When I was 17.
That's for you, Professor. We have a little Frank.
It was
Oh, beautiful. Look at that. In key. Avi, in key you did it, Professor. I love it.
you didn't hear me do I did my TV debut singing the other night on a Jewish network show. I sang the only aria ever written about the Catskill Mountains. Hello, mother. Hello, father. Here I am in Camp Granada.
That was great.
So I had a lot of fun.
God bless you. And now, rumor has it, swirling around the studios here, Professor Dershowitz, that you also like, from Porgy and Bess, Summertime. That's one of your favorite tunes as well?
I love it. I love it. You know, Gershwin's name, before his family changed it, was Dershowitz. And one of his biographers thinks we may be related. So,
I didn't know that. Only you, Avi. Dershowitz was Gershwin's real name. Is that true?
Dershowitz. His name was Dershowitz.
I love it.
And my wife comes from Charleston, South Carolina. And so when we first met, that's one thing we had in common, because, of course, Porgy was written in Charleston, and Catfish Row, where it takes place, is still there. And one of Carolyn's family friends dated Gershwin when he was in Charleston, and we have copies of the letters between Gershwin and this woman, now deceased.
Wow.
But there's a real connection between Dershowitz and Gershowitz. So.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And by the way, happy Hanukkah, Professor. A festival of lights and
early Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Last night.
Thank you.
I said, may the light of the Hanukkah candles eliminate the darkness of growing anti-Semitism all over the world today. It's a real problem.
You know, Professor,
it's coming from the right and the left.
Thanks for bringing it up, because it seems to be, and I've said this before, and we'll touch on this. I'm going to talk to you, of course, about what's going on in Washington, but and I don't know why I have my liberal, and you're a Democrat. You say you're a liberal, you're a Democrat, but all my liberal Democrat friends, they just blindly vote Democrat, and I'm feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, Professor, there's an anti-Semitic rise within the progressive socialist part of that party. Am I wrong here, sir?
No, you're 100% right, and that's why I remain a Democrat. I have to fight against the extreme left, which tolerates anti-Semitism. Same is true in England, where Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, supported by Bernie Sanders, today tolerates growing anti-Semitism. We're also seeing it, obviously, on the extreme right, the neo-Nazis, what happened in Pittsburgh, what happened in Charlottesville. Look, you know, we've been blessed. We're a country of centrist people. You have centrist conservatives, centrist liberals, and that's wonderful. You and I can talk to each other about anything, but once you get to the real extremes, the neo-Nazis on the one hand and the extreme radical leftists on the other hand, we can't talk to each other. And then you have growing Islamic anti-Semitism. Not all Muslims are anti-Semites, but certainly not all Muslim anti-Semites are violent. But polls show a very high level of anti-Semitism among Muslims in France and in other parts of Europe. Not so much in the United States, but a little bit.
Alan Dershowitz with Joe Piscopo. Professor, your reaction to the Michael Cohen plea, it's gotten completely out of control. We are just dying to hear your take on it all.
Well, I think it shows that the Mueller modus operandi, the way he proceeds, is to try to get perjury charges and lying charges against as many people as he can. There have been very, very few indictments that actually relate directly to crimes that were allegedly committed before he was appointed. That was his job, to uncover crimes that had already been committed involving the Trump campaign in Russia. And he's come up pretty much empty on that. What he's come up with is a lot of lying and perjury charges. Those are all crimes that occurred after he became special counsel. And because he became special counsel, his policy has been to try to get people on perjury charges or other unrelated charges and squeeze them. And this is not me talking. This is Judge Ellis, who presided over the Manafort case. He said his tactic is to try to squeeze people to get them to testify. And sometimes not only do they sing, But they compose, they make up stories, they elaborate, they make the story better because they know the better the story, the better the deal. It's a very dangerous approach that prosecutors use in some parts of this country, mostly against really bad people, the mafia, terrorists, etc. But now we're seeing it used against the duly elected president of the United States, a man who I did not vote for, whose policies I often do not support, his immigration policies, his Medicare policies, his environmental policies. But I believe in due process for everybody, even people I didn't vote for.
So what Mueller's trying to do is lay a perjury trap for the president, yes?
He tried to do that, and I think the president's team avoided it because they didn't allow him to testify in person. Remember, you can fall into a perjury trap even if you testify truthfully, because if you testify truthfully, but then somebody else comes in and testifies differently,
right,
they can indict you for perjury even if you testify truthfully.
Oh, my
or
gosh.
what allegedly happened with Corsi, we don't know for sure whether it happened, but this is what it says happened. He made a mistake on day one. He told him he made a mistake. They showed him the email. They said, you can go back tomorrow and correct it. He went back the next day and corrected it. And now they're threatening, according to him at least, to go after him for his mistake on the first day in order to squeeze him. Because once they have you in a perjury trap, you know, you have to think, do you want to spend the rest of your life in jail? Do you want your family to be without a father? Or are you prepared to turn on your best friends, which is, of course, what Cohen has been willing to do, and others have been willing to do. Some have not been willing to do it. And now people are saying, oh, my God, the president obstructed justice because he praised the people who haven't testified against him, and he condemned the people who did. Go back to Thomas Jefferson. When Thomas Jefferson was president, he was determined to get Aaron Burr, and he called people and he offered them pardons if they would testify against Barr, and he threatened them with prosecution if they wouldn't testify against Burr. This is the third president of the United States, one of the greatest presidents in history.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we forget about that precedent and other precedents. Franklin Delano Roosevelt directed that the spies who were caught off Rockaway, I remember when this happened, I was like 5 years old, that they must be tried in a military court and they must be executed. Nothing else will be acceptable. Abraham Lincoln demanded the prosecution of copperheads. We've seen this throughout history. John Kennedy insisted that his attorney general go after Roy Cohen. These are not obstructions of justice. You may not agree with the president doing these things. They're not criminal. You can't just invent crimes and make them up if you don't like the person in office.
But what about Michael Cohen says one thing about the president had he lied, and he's lying that he lied. He said yes, Donald Trump had this meeting in Russia. And now what if, Professor? What if the president wrote something that went against what Michael Cohen said, as phony and as lying as Cohen was, but the president writes something in his submission to Mueller that goes up against what Cohen says? Where does that leave the president, and how will Mueller deal with that?
That means that they sprung the perjury trap on him, and that may be why they waited until after the president gave his answers before they indicted Cohen the second time. Look, it's not a crime for the president, even if it's true, and I don't know whether it's true, to have thought about building a Trump Tower in Moscow. That's not a crime. And the president didn't testify under oath about it, as far as we know, but we don't know what the written questions were. And, if Cohen has no credibility, though, to put Cohen in a courtroom and put him in a seat to be cross-examined by a lawyer would be a disaster because he's lied so much. Manafort has lied so much. These are not good witnesses. Again, in mafia cases, you get convictions. Even when, Sammy the Bull Gravano testifies, you get convictions because the guys are obviously bad guys. But when you're going against the President of the United States or other people close to the President, I think you need pretty solid evidence, and the evidence that I've seen thus far doesn't meet that standard.
And Professor, this week, before we let you go, the special counsel is due to make crucial court filings, sentencing memos for Michael Flynn and Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort. What should we be looking for in these filings, sir?
Well, I don't think Michael Flynn committed any crimes. I think, again, if he weren't close to the president, he never would have been indicted for perhaps misstating something about a meeting that he maybe didn't remember. So I would expect that there'd be very minimal sentence for Flynn. Look, Manafort, they're gonna really give it to him because he tried to play both ends against the middle, and he alienated the prosecutor, and the prosecutor's going to come after him.
And Roger Stone, the president tweeted praise for Roger Stone for refusing to testify. Some people are saying, well, people are saying that this actually could amount to witness tampering or obstruction of justice. Do you agree with that?
No, you can't tamper with a witness in public when you issue a tweet for millions of people to see. The president's entitled to say what he believes. He's protected by not only Article 2 of the Constitution, but the First Amendment, like all the rest of us are. And the idea that that's witness tampering would, diminish the rights of all Americans to comment on public events. I also praise people when they don't flip and don't turn state's evidence.
Yeah.
Look, I grew up in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, you didn't rat on your friends. That was part of what we learned on the street.
I
got in deep trouble once. I'll tell you a story. Deep trouble once because Alan Bachman, who was sitting next to me, I was a basketball player in high school, he reached into my gym bag and he threw my jockstrap at the rabbi. And it landed literally on his head. And it had my name, Avi Dershowitz, right in my jockstrap. The rabbi, res ipsa loquitur, had my name. The rabbi said, Dershowitz, you did this, and I'm going to punish you unless. And I said, no, I didn't do it. He said, well, tell me who did it. I said, I'm not telling you who did it.
Oh, wow.
I don't rat out my friends, and I got in trouble.
I
got in trouble as the result of that. But, I'm not going to rat out Alan Bachman, even though he didn't do the right thing for me. He was my friend.
Avi, you are the best. Avi Dershowitz from Brooklyn, Harvard Law professor. The name of the book, by the way, The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Professor, when you come to a concert, and Frankie Five Boroughs is right here, we're going to put it, when I was 17, it was a very good year. We are putting that on the playlist.
It was a very good year. It was a very good year when I was 17. When I was 16, it wasn't so good. I was a bum in high school. But 17, A, the Brooklyn Dodgers win the World Series.
Look at
B,
this.
I started out in college and become a straight A student. So that's a good song for me.
I love
when I was 17, it was a very good year.
Right in key, too.
We'll
Professor, thank you, Professor. We love you, and thank you so much,
you.
sir. Alan Dershowitz right there with Piscopo in the morning. 9:52, Debbie's on the roads looking out for you.